Is your diet secretly sabotaging your life? As we get older, we're told that we're on the decline. And I can safely tell you now, never back that idea. We're not supposed to decline as we age. But if we eat the wrong foods that we don't mesh with, they basically start to bring us down over time. So we're not optimal. So what I want to explore today is a Mediterranean diet right for you. It works for a lot of people. What about carnivore, ketovore, paleo, vegetarian, keto? But one thing I can tell you with working with hundreds of people, PhD, functional doctors, clinical nutritionists, is that the Western diet, my friends, isn't ideal for anyone. It is not. And we'll talk about that as we progress because, the foods that we eat are directly impacting how we show up into the world. They can cause fatigue because when you don't have energy, it's like, well, screw it, man. I'll do it tomorrow. But we shouldn't be like that. We should be charged up every single day. It's lowering our hormones. And these hormones lower fear and anxiety, and they increase motivation, confidence, courage, optimism to get us out there and get shit done like a boss. So let's talk about it. Now, one of the biggest impacts food will have on you is completely destroying your gut. Now, it's not like you'll feel this happening. You could get a bit of distension, a bit of bloating, and you think, oh, no big deal. It's kind of a big deal because they're clues. Your body is screaming at you saying, dude, fix it, fix it, fix it. There's something wrong inside you. So what I'm going to uncover here are the tools and solutions that you can use right now to identify the best diet for you. So let's talk about the gut because it's absolutely foundational to human health. So what you might know is inside your gut, you've got a brain. It's called an enteric nervous system. It's got hundreds of millions of neurons. It's talking to every cell and every organ in your body there. So if we got a sick gut, we're sick. And we're told this is normal. It's not normal. And the most important thing I want to tell you today is you can fix this. So basically, when you've got a sick gut, you've got a sick brain. And this can show up in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s, depending on how good your genes are. You might better clear out this stress. You might have good gut genes. It's just all very dependent. So when you've got a sick gut, your brain suffers. Your earning potential comes down. So you could have too much stress, negative emotions, anxiety, depression, IBS, schizophrenia, cognitive decline, memory issues, comprehension issues, brain fog, and even old autism over here. And then our hormones, the endocrine axis, our hormones are busted. And then the heart. So cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, thrombosis, which is thick, sludgy blood, hypertension, high blood pressure. And then the old lungs there, so you could get seasonal allergies, wheezing, asthma, rhinitis. And then when it comes to detoxing and keeping estrogen at healthy levels, the liver. Like the liver is absolutely key and foundational to great hormones, energy, detox. And then the old pancreas here. So we're talking about type 1, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, and insulin resistance. And what about the old bones here? So your joints. It can even demineralize your bones and cause osteoporosis. And then muscle. So a lot of dudes are at the gym, they're doing the bench press, sick gut, so they find it difficult to pack on muscle. Now the problem becomes you get in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, sarcopenia sets in, muscle wasting, and you become frail. How many people, older people, do you see now with these goddamn walkers? Like this shouldn't be happening. And then your skin. So we're talking about acne, cirrhosis, atopic dermatitis, and advanced wrinkles and skin aging. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound too helpful to me. And then the reproductive axis. So testes for men, sperm, fertility, and testosterone, and also the ovaries for the ladies there. Kidneys and bladder. So as we can see, it's huge. So what we've got to understand is that food can cause that, but also mental stress. Paradoxically, as I've learned, that when you've got a sick gut, you've got anxiety, right? And this gives you more negative emotions, and you ruminate on these negative emotions, and that just brings everything down. And to make matters worse, it destroys your gut. Let me play this video here from Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and she'll just talk about how stress hormones, whether it's food or whether it's mental stress, can destroy your gut.
Cortical releasing hormone, which is a stress hormone, through the vagal nerve. When you release it, goes into the gut. It activates immune cells, which then activate other proteins in the gut that chew up. They're called proteases. They chew up the gut barrier, and then you start to release more inflammatory cells, which then get in contact with bacteria, more inflammation, and then it goes back. It's like this feedback loop.
So yeah, you've got to protect the gut there. And paradoxically, as I mentioned, food stress can cause mental stress. Like we can see this now. The older we get, the worse it becomes. Now let's talk about the stress. So we've got eustress, which builds you up, builds up muscle, builds up your mental resilience, and you make testosterone when you're in eustress and stimulation zone there. And then you've got distress, and no one likes distress because we feel like shit. And food sensitivities can cause this and also impact your sleep. And when you're not sleeping properly, you wake up with low hormones and more cortisol than you care to have. And to make matters worse there, as the scientific literature is very robust now, they've actually done fMRI brain imaging of the working brain, and they've found in lots of different studies here, you've heard Tony Robbins say, change your state, change your state. You've got to be motivated and revved up. Now, that's good. That's eustress. You feel good, right? And you're making testosterone. But distress, your brain changes gears. You've got heart arrhythmias, which isn't good for heart function. But the amygdala, it's got the juice. So you're thinking, oh, shit, am I embarrassing myself? Am I making a fool out of myself? But look at your cortex, your moneymaker. You got decreased cortical activity, so you can't think. You got ums and ahs, you can't articulate. You lose your divergent, convergent thinking and remote associations, and you feel like an idiot. But what we want to try and get you to understand here is that eustress, like your heart rate can be 100 or 120, and you can be stimulating testosterone production. But importantly, when you're speaking on stage or whatever it is there, you've got increased cortical activity. You've got a little bit of amygdala activity, which is healthy, and you've got great heart rhythms, which is absolutely beautiful. So eustress, eustress, good, distress, terrible. Now, when I was doing my certificate in nutrition, the functional doctors there said you should take Dr. Daddis's course. So he works with clinicians, training them. He's got, thousands of data points from patients there. And I went and did his gut course, his food sensitivity course, and his thyroid course. And this one was a part of the gut course. Listen to this.
And then some people have antibodies that cross-react with the thyroid gland. And there's some foods that have been shown to cross-react, like we talked about earlier. Lectins and gluten is another one, for example, for the thyroid gland. So when they get exposed to those foods, they may have some thyroid tissue destruction. Notice they get anxiety, nervousness, an hyperactive thyroid state. They can't sleep anymore. They may get some memory and trembling. So that's a specific reaction to a food. Or you can have antibodies, for example, cross-react with the pancreas. The example we gave earlier is like milk proteins and pancreatic islet cells. So these cross-reactivity reactions don't happen with everyone. They happen when there's a combination of some genes involved, so dysregulation of the immune system called loss of immune tolerance, and the antibody exposure that has the potential to cross-react because those amino acid sequences are important. The reason I wanted to share this with you is the goal of trying to understand food sensitivities. When these people walk into the healthcare, people think they're crazy. They go, "There's no way that eating a piece of bread is going to make you dizzy. I think it's in your head. I think it's psychological. There's no way, for example, eating food is going to cause you anxiety, or eating a specific food protein is going to cause you anxiety. Those things can happen.
They absolutely can happen there. And he talks about getting dizzy there. So when you get a bit older and you're eating foods you're very sensitive to, it causes gluten ataxia in the brain there. So it causes tissue damage in your brain and central nervous system. So this is the cross-reactivity he's talking about. And we've tested hundreds of people now, and we've found with those hundreds of people that about 90% have gluten sensitivity. So it's a pretty big deal there. And we'll talk about how to work this out towards the end and what you need to do. We'll give you solutions that you can do right now. So let's keep moving on here. Now, one of the big ones that's in my DNA, I'm sensitive to nightshade foods. And this is a big group of foods, and it's got a lot of deleterious effects on our gut, our blood pressure, like a whole bunch of different things, our gut mobility, intestinal function. So it's academic now. Some people do have a sensitivity to nightshades. And with hundreds of people that we've tested, we're seeing it about 25%. And lectin's about 65%. So we'll talk about that and how you can identify it towards the end here. But basically, what we've got to do is identify the problem with symptoms. Like you could have gut issues, you could have joint pain, you could have skin issues, you could have a bit of wheezing. There's a lot of different things, but it's going to tank your gut, which will tank your V8 hormones like DHEA and testosterone, growth hormone, thyroid hormone. And what goes up? You're fatigued, you're having insomnia, you're a bit frustrated with negative emotions, you've got anxiety and depression. So there's some of the symptoms that we have to identify there. Then there's solutions that we can now use to fix this problem, and that will show you how long it's going to take to get back to health. So let's just keep exploring the nightshade one here, and we'll talk about other ones as we progress. Now, this one's a pretty big deal, nightshades, and this is the one that I've got. Now, I've got a big nightshade and also plant insecticide. So you might think, well, Mark, he's a carnivore. No, I'm not a carnivore. It doesn't work for me. So I don't use a carnivore diet. I've tried it. It doesn't work for me. I'm not optimal. And I'll talk more about what is optimal for me. Now, this is the nightshade and plant insecticide gene, and this is what it causes in a lot of people. Check this out.
With fatigue, you want to know what's causing fatigue. Here it is. Yeah, nightshades are definitely contributing.
So these nightshade, definitely contributing, but also the anxiety with the caffeine.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. I mean, he's got the thyroid, which contributes to fatigue. He's got those estrogen genes.
Yeah.
He's got the vitamin D genes. They're definitely linked to fatigue. He's got the gluten sensitivity. He's got the CRP, which is, it's all, there's a lot of targets here, and he's got to dial them all in, intermittent fast. And this is where caffeine actually comes back up, because this gene, it's involved in caffeine doesn't just break down with one single process in your body.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple enzymes that are involved in breaking it down. So a little bit of it gets broken down, and then it goes down the line, and then it gets broken out a little bit more, and then it goes down the line and this is on that assembly line where that's involved in breaking down caffeine, BCHE.
Yep.
So caffeine stays in his body longer because of this gene.
Right.
So therefore it could trigger more anxiety.
Okay.
And same with pepper and some other things that are kind of unusual, like huperzine or something. Like some people take huperzine as a supplement. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is nightshades. I would avoid
nightshades.
Tomato. So wouldn't you want to know if you had that issue there? Like everything that how I want you to think through this is that everything you put in your body can cause a decrease in performance. And over time, that just shows up as fatigue. And we're told that this is normal. It's not normal. So we want to take off the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table, everything that does that, and then put on the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table everything that increases performance so you can show up and become the best person, man, woman that you were born to be. Now, this is a multifaceted issue here, this gene. So as I mentioned, nightshade, so you've got different plant materials there, but also supplements like ashwagandha. You've been told that ashwagandha is fantastic. If I take ashwagandha, everything comes down and cortisol goes up. But it's also insecticides. So you've got two classes of these insecticides. You've got natural ones from plants. So it doesn't mean I can't eat plants, it just means I can't eat a lot of them. You might think, well, Mark does a carnivore diet. No, I certainly don't do a carnivore diet. I've tried it and it wasn't optimal for me. So I'm all about optimization. And then you've got the fucking pesticides like organophosphates and carbamates. So I've got to be very careful about eating organic. So if this is you, we've got to be very careful. Now, another thing that's going to really screw you up with this gene, just this one alone, is it's going to screw up your sleep. and it's going to increase stress hormones, cortisol. And when that's the case, that you don't make a lot of DHEA. You see, here's the issue. The precursor to both cortisol and DHEA is this hormone here, ACTH, and it's released in a pulsatile manner 40 times a day. So what we've got to think about, quite simply, is that when is cortisol dominant and when is DHEA dominant? It really is that simple. So in the morning, it helps you wake up. It puts a lot of energy into the system, gives you a lot of focus when it's at healthy levels. And the middle line here, this is healthy. Comes up, then it comes back down. Now, because it's low, what hormone will take over? Well, of course, DHEA. So late into the night, 9, 10 o'clock, you're making a boatload of DHEA and also testosterone. So you wake up with DHEA and testosterone. Now, DHEA is damn important. It's a neural steroid. So on screen here, so when you got optimal DHEA, it increases the positive effect scales of caring and vigor, strength and vitality there, and significantly decreases the negative effect scales of these negative emotions like guilt, hostility, burnout, anxiety, and stress. Now, DHEA significantly and positively related to the affective state, warm-heartedness, whereas cortisol, when she's dysregulated, when you're not sleeping, when you've got these food intolerances, is significantly and positively related to stress. Up here, the guilt, stress effects. Because cortisol, when it's too high, it fosters negative emotions. And it goes back to that whole thing that I mentioned before, your state. Like we become our dominant states. The brain represents people as a sum of the mental states they experience. So if you've got too much cortisol, you're not sleeping, you're missing out. Your brain's literally rewiring to become that person. And I'm sure you want the other hormones in the up direction and cortisol to be optimal. And DHEA, superior military performance. Now, I'm not in the military, but I sure want to perform like those legends. And what about your academic performance? Increasing your earning potential. So we're talking problem solving, academic performance. So we got to fix this problem. Quite simply, cortisol's up, then cortisol's down, then DHEA comes back up, and you wake up with a sack full of the good stuff, the VA hormones. So just that's how you want to think through it. Now, there's another hormone that's affected by cortisol when it's dysregulated from the wrong foods for us, which is thyroid hormone. Now, thyroid hormone increases your metabolism, it boosts testosterone, it increases liver detox, it increases muscle mass, it increases fat loss, brain function. It's like the king. So we got to have optimal levels of cortisol to have optimal levels of testosterone, to have optimal levels of DHEA, to have optimal levels of thyroid hormone. So you can see how the foods that we eat significantly affect how we show up in the light in the world. So I believe in my heart that the more people that know you in a positive way, remember DHEA, warm-heartedness, caring, then we're going to attract the right people to us, and people want to be around people that lift them up and show them that it's possible. So we've just got to get these hormones back to balance. Optimal cortisol, optimal DHEA, optimal testosterone, optimal thyroid hormone there. So ideally, what you see on the screen here, you've got melatonin, cortisol, DHEA, and testosterone. So if we do things right, cortisol is going to come up the way it should here in the middle line here, come back down, then DHEA tops up while we sleep, and beautiful. And melatonin here comes up, and we release a lot of melatonin so we can sleep deeply and stay asleep so we don't wake up. So if you're frequently waking up, you've got way too much stress hormones. That is academic there. So you can see how this plays out. Now, there's another thing that we need to think about here is that, right? As I mentioned at the beginning of this, you've got eustress. So your brain has increased cortical activity. The amygdala's got a healthy dose. You've got great heart rhythms, and you're making testosterone and DHEA. But when you've got those food sensitivities, you're eating the wrong foods for you, it's just like pushing a rock uphill. It's just harder. So why handicap ourselves? Because right here, you got decreased cortical activity. So you're just like, oh, fuck, man, I'll do it tomorrow. Now's not a good time. And the amygdala is saying, yeah, that's right, man. You don't have a lot of energy anyway. And you got heart arrhythmia, so heart disease shows up. But, we just got to get cortisol back to healthy and we can make the good stuff. Now, the old nightshades, big problem, but we've also got lectins. We've also got, a whole bunch of other ones, which I'll talk about on another video there, but it's absolutely huge. If you've got a genetic sensitivity to nightshades, we've got a sick gut. We have a sick gut and our sleep is shit. And these nightshade food allergies, my friends, they are no joke. In both adults and pediatric population, food allergies, not just nightshade, but other food allergies can cause significant morbidity, and mortality. All right. Now, one thing that really grinds my gears is what you see on screen there. So when we've got a sick gut, and it can show up as a bit of distension, a bit of bloating, your stools aren't very good, and you're told that that's normal, no big deal, but you don't feel great, and you're told that they just send you on your way. So what you got to understand is the medical system treats sick people and functional medicine gets you back in the game. Now, when you've got a sick gut, it leads to anxiety and depression-like behavior. So it goes back to those mental states, and the more you stay in those mental states, that's the person you become. So it also induces comorbidities, neuroinflammation, and it activates the HPA axis, which is more cortisol. Now, again, when I went through and did my certificate in nutrition, I went through and did Dr. Daddis's other courses like thyroid, food sensitivities, gut health, and this is what he said. And it made a lot of sense to me. Listen to this.
So inflammation in the gut activates gut immune cells. Those gut immune cells send messenger proteins to cells in the brain called neuroglia. Those neuroglia get activated, and then the brain gets inflamed. And when the brain gets inflamed, nerve conduction, synapses slow down. Inflammation in the brain slows down synapses, and patients just can't think, they can't focus, they can't get their thought process going on. So those are the things that happen with it. So basically, some people that have immune reactions to gluten, they get severe brain inflammation when they eat it. They can even have their blood-brain barrier, gut barrier breakdown. They can set up the stage for neurological autoimmunity. They can decrease blood flow to their brain. As their brain gets inflamed, their messenger synaptic pathways become slower, and they just don't function well. And they walk in the healthcare system and they get diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder or chronic anxiety disorder.
So you get misdiagnosed because you've got a sick gut, and it's because you're eating the foods that don't mesh with you. And this is what happened to me. I was diagnosed with this anxiety. I had panic attacks, social anxiety, and I also had asthma and all of these things, and I was medicated on them. I was on beta blockers. And guess what these big pharma drugs do? Well, as I learned from Dr. J, who did a 5-year PhD in hormones, and also Dr. Ken Berry, this is what they do.
All those things are symptoms of low testosterone, and there's a long list of prescription medications that you might be taking from your doctor, your doctor that you trust, that could actually be plummeting your testosterone levels. I've got a YouTube video about medications that lower testosterone.
Okay, so they lower testosterone. They even say it on the warning there, it lowers your libido. Well, that's lowering testosterone right there. It even says it. And this is what Dr. J said about it. Now, to give you some context here, we were talking about how testosterone lowers inflammation. And when you lower inflammation, especially in the gut there, you got a big uptick in testosterone. So listen to this.
Discs in the back, it goes back to testosterone. It probably has some low back stuff, but this plus in the sheet, almost everybody complains of low back pain and things.
Yep.
But it's all about testosterone to keep that at bay, to protect against future problems there. Testosterone.
How does testosterone do that?
It shuts off interleukins. And interleukins, kind of like CRP, it's a form of inflammation.
Right. Okay.
And there's 24 of them. There's IL-1, there's IL-2, there's IL-3, all the way to 24. And some of them are in your knees, and some are in your elbows, and some are in your discs in your back, and some are in your brain.
Yeah.
And so like this particular one, IL-1 alpha, it's called interleukin-1 alpha. It's in your discs in your low back.
Yep.
and it can get out of hand and just cause specific low back disc degeneration, disc pain, bulging discs, and all this kind of stuff if you have inflammation there all the time, and testosterone shuts it off.
So I guess testosterone would be a very powerful lever to pull down on to get rid of inflammation when it's up at the right level.
Exactly. Yeah. In general,
yeah.
Especially in the low back. Yeah. That's why the drug companies hate it, right? Because if you have nice high testosterone, it's going to heal a lot of chronic issues that they're prescribing drugs for, like arthritis and gut issues, like IBS. They have all these drugs for irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah.
It's just like on and on.
Testosterone is like a magic trick to bring down inflammation all over the body.
Exactly. So, yeah.
So why don't they do that? Because they're not trained to do that. They're not trained to increase your testosterone or heal your gut. They are trained to prescribe drugs. So they're trained to prescribe sick people. So if you want to do big things in this world, we got to do things differently. Like it affects your brain. So you've got interleukins in your brain. It lowers inflammation in your brain, your gut, your discs. Do you see what's going on here? And this is a little excerpt from Shark Tank. Listen to this.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Why not just go license it to one of the big drug companies?
Because I did that originally. I went to one of the biggest in the United States, and they told me we were actually a competitor, and if they took the product, they would shelf it. Because why would they prevent it for $1 when they could treat it for $14?
Why would they prevent it for $1 when they can treat it for $14? So this is what we're up against. Now, another thing that these big pharma drugs do is they've got emulsifiers in them. Now, what do emulsifiers do? They've been shown to do this. They wash away the protective lining of your gut. And one of the ones that big pharma use is what's called polysorbate 80. Let's go over here. So dietary emulsifiers in the gut and the small intestines there. So they wash away the protective lining of your gut. So these emulsifiers here, the tight junctions open up. You got a lot of systemic inflammation. So they're not really there to help you at all. They basically lower the inflammation so you don't feel the pain. And all this dysfunction is still festering and going on inside you. So that's kind of how I think about big pharma there. Now, here's the solutions. I'm going to give you 2 solutions. Now, solution number 1 takes a bit of guesswork, and it takes a bit longer, and it's just a little bit harder to do. This is a great place to start. And I'll talk about solution 2. And you see, solution 2, we look at your exposome, your genome, your microbiome, your food sensitivities. That's going to give you a clear, time-bound path to get back to health with certainty. The elimination diet, basically in a nutshell, you've got to get away from big food because it's big, toxic. So a lot of their foods packed full of it's basically inflammatory food. And you've heard this before, but like right here on screen, this is just one aspect of it. You've got advanced glycation and lip oxidization end products in your food. So the way they process their food causes that. And it can cause atherosclerosis and heart disease, arthritis, pulmonary disorders like asthma and wheezing and rhinitis, seasonal allergies. But, number 4, endocrine disorders. So it's disrupting your hormones. And right here, shortens your telomeres. That's accelerated aging at a molecular level. And then point number 5, it causes 50 times more free radicals. And guess what? We're not done yet because it's packed full of chemicals and pure endocrine disruptors, okay? So get rid of big food. They're all for profit. They're not there to help you. It's convenient, it's tasty, and it's designed to be addictive so you keep coming back for more. But because you're so fatigued and your energy's down, it's like, oh, fuck it, man. I just couldn't be bothered. I'm just going to get some big food because it's addictive, it tastes good, and it's convenient. And that's exactly why people keep going back to it time and time again. But the health consequences are pretty severe. So basically what you can do is use what we call the hunter method. So the hunter method is really simple. You hunt for your protein. Where? Your trusted butcher. So you get quality meat from your trusted butcher and you're supporting them as a local industry. Now, the next thing you can do is get your fruit and your veg from your trusted producer. So you can see with my genes, especially with I've got a sensitivity to plant insecticides, organophosphates, from synthetic pesticides. I really need to be eating organic. And about 25% of the people that we test, over hundreds of them now, have that sensitivity right there. So just go to your trusted producer. And then you've got no problems with chemicals. You've got no problems with food quality. And then what you put into your body should infer an uptick in performance. Now, what we need to also do is, well, work with a trusted healthcare professional, because the easiest diet to do, if you don't do my second protocol, which I'll talk about in a moment, is use a carnivore diet for about 2 to 4 weeks. And that's what the functional doctors, some of the functional doctors we work with recommend that people go on a carnivore diet, especially if you've got a lot of pathologies. So a carnivore diet is going to take all those plant insecticides off and all those problematic plant foods like lectins, like nightshades, everything I've been speaking about here today. And then you reintroduce them, like say the nightshades, and you'll feel in about 1 or 2 days, everything will start coming down. You go, well, shit, I am sensitive to those. And it could also be lectins. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, about over 90% of the people that we test have gluten sensitivity. Some of them celiac, not a lot, but gluten sensitivity is completely different than celiac, and that's going to cause those long-term health consequences. So that's basically the elimination diet. Now let's talk about the other thing that we can do. Just find the slide here. So the second solution is, I've got a PDF that you can download, and it's also got videos to walk you through exactly how to do this. But in that PDF and these videos that support the PDF, we show you how to reach out to these functional doctors. And what they'll do is they'll look at your exposome, which is just your history and your blood labs. And if you haven't got your blood labs done, they'll show you how to do it. And this is absolutely key. If you've ever heard me talking about blood labs before, if you don't know what's busted inside you, number one, but number two, if you don't know what optimal blood labs are, you're never going to get back to health. So case history, symptoms, blood labs, that's what the exposome is right here. Now, the next thing you can do is look at your microbiome, your gut health. So that's what the functional professionals can help you with there. And they can give you a tailored plan to get your gut back to health. And then, of course, you can look at your genome there. Now, as I've talked about, as we progressed through this video training here today, we can be genetically sensitive to lectins, gluten, nightshades, a whole bunch of different things, like even things like plant sterols. You could have Alzheimer's risk, you could have sleep issues genetically. You might know how many carbs you can eat, what fats to eat, things like that. And the genome can work all of that out. And the final thing you can do is look at your food sensitivities. And that's very simply an IgG food sensitivity test, not to be mistaken with an IgE test, which is food allergy, which is completely different, but a food sensitivity. Now, the difference between a food allergy IgE and food sensitivity IgG is that the IgG, it doesn't show up. It takes 1 to 3 days until you got a downtick in energy. But unfortunately for a lot of people, they're constantly in this state and they just get used to being with low energy, fatigue, brain fog. They're not sleeping properly. They're packing on the weight and they just don't feel optimal. So that's all the things you can do there. And if you want to, you can book a call with me and I can walk you through all of that. So there should be information on this page about how to do that. Now, what I also want to show you is what's possible, because this is key to knowing with certainty that you can get the results that you want. So we were working, here's a case study that I just want to show you. So a gentleman came to us about 5 months ago, 38 years old, and guess what? He was on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and he still felt like shit. Why? That's because he was taking all that testosterone because he had stress and inflammation he didn't know about, and it was aromatized and turned into estrogen, so he was estrogen dominant. And he came to us, he heard me speaking on TikTok, reached out to me. So then I asked him questions about his exposome, his blood labs, his past history, and then we started to work together and we got him off TRT. So basically this is when he was on TRT. And you'll see down here is FSH and LH, which are precursors to fertility, spermagenesis, and testosterone. They were basically zero, right? They weren't even reading. That means that he was on TRT, because when you go on TRT, your body doesn't need to make the precursors for testosterone because you're getting it in through an injection. But the problem with that is your fertility comes down with it. So FSH comes down as well. So you don't make a lot of sperm. So this is like a natural contraceptive for men being on TRT. Now, he wants to have kids. So this was his labs just before we started working together when he was still on TRT. And testosterone was pretty high, 1,228 nanograms. And his free T was pretty high too. But so was his estrogen. His estrogen was through the roof. And this was on the 13th of November, 23 last year there. And today, well, a few days ago, the 29th of January. So this is January. So this is the second lab that we did in January there. And we got his testosterone up to 599 nanograms. So that's Australian units there, 20.8. And his free T was pretty good too. But you'll see here that his LH and his FSH were coming back up. So he was triggered to make testosterone when he went through our system. And then just recently, a few days ago, 25th of March, 24, you can see here these LH and FSH are perfect. They're in the butter zone there to make testosterone and fertility. And his testosterone was 28.9 in Australia, which equates to 813. Now, what makes this pretty good is this. So when we did his genome right here, we noted that he's got slow testosterone genetics, which means he's not supposed to make a lot of testosterone. And as a double whammy, he's got very poor estrogen genetics. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 issues with estrogen. So he's got a lot of estrogen sensitivity. So when he was on TRT and he was aromatizing all of his testosterone turned to estrogen, he felt like garbage because he was so sensitive to estrogen. So what we did is looked at his exposome, his genome, his microbiome, and his food sensitivities, and that's how we could get into certainty and a time-bound path. So March 25th, and we started putting this together in the 13th of November. So we got him off TRT, and he had a clear time-bound path. Like, this was actually quicker than we expected too, but he was so on point. He did everything that we said. Everything was on point. He was just hungry to get there. So we got his testosterone up to 830 nanograms there by the 25th of March. So again, if you want to reach out to me and I can show you how to work all this out, book a call with me and we can show you how to do that. So he had slow testosterone genes, terrible estrogen genes, but he's now optimal because we looked at all those 4 data points there. And we knew his exposome, his history, his blood labs, his genome. We knew genetically what he was sensitive to, his microbiome, which we started to correct, and also his food sensitivities there. So we got him off TRT and he increased his fertility because his fertility was rock bottom at 2 million sperm count. And we got him to 13 million in 6 months because he wants to have kids and he's 38. So he's really happy with that result. And this is Jazim talking about it.
Great experience with Mark Owen. I started this journey with Mark about a few months ago now. I was really, really depressed, run down, my gut health. I was on TRT, I was doing it all wrong. My body was falling apart. I reached out to Mark, said I needed help. We got on the phone, we spoke, and then we just started the journey from there. We worked on how to increase my testosterone levels naturally. We worked on my gut health, and ever since then, my gut is all normal. My testosterone levels have reached normal levels. My fertility has came back, and I'm learning every week a new thing from Mark, and it's actually changed my life, and I'm going to be here with this journey for a very, very long time, and you know, I'm just in a very happy place with him, explaining to me every week how to improve my actual life. And and I'm just following his steps, and it's a life changer. It's an absolute life changer, and I really, really recommend to anyone who's suffering in any way with their gut health or just their daily life that needs to pick up their energy levels, to reach out to Mark, because you're going to get nothing but the best information from him.
Now, I believe in my heart that you're only as good as your team. And again, that's why we work with experts like my friend, Dr. J, did a 5-year PhD in hormones, functional doctors, clinical nutritionists, and why I went through and did my certificate in nutrition. So what we're interested in is taking away from this beat up 4-cylinder engine right here to this V8 like just in there. And as you can see there, you can get off TRT. We increase it pretty nicely there, and clear time-bound path back to certainty there. Now, one of the biggest things that grinds my gears is that the current medical system only sees in 2 shades. They see in white, healthy, or over here, prescribe you drugs. So you've got all these symptoms that are starting to show up, and they say, that's normal, all right? Off you go. They send you on your way, and you feel like shit. You got no energy, you got no get up and go, you're gaining weight, and you just get by. You put things off, you worry about what other people think, and you think, oh, when my life gets easier, then I'll have time for myself. But you're moving very close to these pathology states, and it takes a lot to walk that back. Now, this is going to be pretty hard to hear. This is my friend, Dr. Ken Berry, and he said this to me the last time I spoke to Dr. Ken, and it really shook me to the core. Listen to this.
Absolutely. It's often too late by the time you've become financially comfortable.
Yeah.
Very often you've done so much damage to every tiny artery in your body that you're now stuck with permanent erectile dysfunction or permanent forgetfulness or permanent insomnia, permanent shortness of breath, chest pain, right? Gut issues. You've done so much damage. Some of it can't be taken back. And that's why I'm so active on social media, constantly reaching out and trying to help people, because once it's too late, you might regain a little bit of that function, but it's never going to be like it once was, and it's never going to be like it could have been. And that's very sad if you think about it, that somebody's basically handicapped for the rest of their life, physically or mentally or emotionally, because of bad dietary decisions that they made for the first few decades of their life.
All right, so that's Dr. Ken. So we've only seen 2 people with hundreds that we couldn't really help. They were just too far gone, and we send them to other people to try and fix their issues. But as I mentioned there, like these functional doctors, they know what they're talking about. Your constipation, your bloating, your stomach pain are early signs of autoimmune disease developing. So one example here is Parkinson's disease, cognitive decline. You know, this is what's showing up for a lot of people. But because the system doesn't really care, because they only see you're either healthy or you're over here, even though you feel like shit, you got no energy, you got no get up and go, they send you on your way, and you're progressing all the way down here to that place there. To hell with that. So let's just recap what we talked about here today. So what diet's the best for you? Who knows? The Mediterranean diet, great for a lot of people, takes me out. The carnivore diet doesn't work for me. The keto diet doesn't work for me. The paleo diet doesn't work for me. I eat to my genetic code, and I know exactly what that is. And that gives me certainty that the foods that I'm putting into my body will not cause my gut to tank, my hormones to tank, my energy to tank, and critically, my moneymaker to tank. Because what do you got left if you're like 70 or 80 and you got cognitive decline? I mean, the brain is just so important there. So the elimination diet, use the Hunter method. You got any other questions? There should be information on this page, or drop a comment below. And on the next video, we'll just dive a little bit deeper into all of this, and I'll probably talk about how to heal your gut, because it's a pretty big deal. But we're all different with the gut too. Like one protocol won't work for someone else. So when you look at the microbiome, you can create a framework specific for that individual. So that's absolutely key to know. Now, that's about it. That's all I've really got to talk about here today. But you can see how now that food can actually drive anxiety and depression. And that's the big point that I wanted to make today. But you can fix this. And the easiest way to get there on a time-bound path with certainty, exposome, genome, microbiome, and food sensitivities.